at an early age, I didn't really realize I was different. I think as a kid, you're very pure, and the world hasn't tainted your brain and your soul yet. I'm sure I noticed little differences, but I think the biggest challenge was middle school and high school. And for me, it was like the whole relationship dynamic. And so when your friends are going to proms and dances and they're dating and you're not dating and you don't have that type of connection, I think that leads to you feeling like you're less than or inadequate or not enough. And I would create these beliefs and stories around the things that I never had because of my body. And I was a big victim, and the world would say rightfully so, that I was just not doing so well. And that pain, I literally had two choices. I was like, you can either take your life or you can figure out how to fall in love with the vessel, right? The no legs and one arm isn't going away. So what are the ways that you can increase the capacity of love you have for yourself and the love for your vessel? And my main thing was if I could become like an athlete and a wrestler, that my identity would shift. I would feel more confident. Maybe the girls will like me because I'm a wrestler, and maybe I'll love myself a little bit more. And so that pain forced me to shift, and my shift was to go amputate 5 inches of this limb off because my bone was growing faster than my skin and I couldn't do physical activities with it. So I decided to amputate 5 inches of this arm off and then became a wrestler. And that changed my whole entire life. But childhood is difficult for everybody. It's difficult for everybody because most of your beliefs aren't yours. You picked them up from someone else. And so during your whole life, during the whole time you were in school, people said things and you didn't know that you started to believe them. That you were stupid, you should sit over there, you're not good enough, you'll never have friends, whatever it is. Everybody's been programmed in some sort of way. And so for me, it was a nice crucible. It was a trial of passage. I think it created a lot of negative emotion, which I was able to transmute into success. Like you look at me now and people are like, how'd you get this far? And it's like, the reason I got this far is because every time I got something, it never felt enough and I thought I needed more. And for 8 years of my entrepreneurship journey, I would say like 6, 7 of it is seeking validation from other people. And I'm just turning the corner on realizing that the only person that's going to make me happy is me. Nothing materialistic will ever fill a spiritual hole. There's nothing the external world can give me that's going to make me feel great. You think it's the money and then you make the amount of money and then it doesn't make you feel anything. You get the car and then the car doesn't, you realize it's all fake.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It kind of racks your brain.
Yeah.
I always tell people, it's like when I was broke and my rich mentors would be like, money doesn't solve everything. I'd be like, damn, great. Give me your money. Yeah. I'll take your money. Write me the check, bro. More money, more problems. Like, what does that mean? Give me, I never understood it until you make the money. There's a version of you that was like, man, I wish I could make 10K a month. And then you make 10K a month. You're like, man, if I could just do 50. Mm-hmm. And then you do it. And then you just kick the ball down the street,
Yep.
And so I don't know if I answered your question, but childhood was make it or break it. It was either take your life or love your life. And I never had the power. I never had the strength to take my life.
I'm just dwelling on that last sentence you just said. I never had the strength to take my life. It's almost like you never had the weakness. Maybe that's a better way to frame it. I'll dwell on that one.
I like it. I received that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of it. I think it was like the strength that prevented you. Yeah. What was the dynamic like with your family? So obviously, when you were born, for your parents, they must have felt all sorts of emotions, right? And then you're growing up. It's weird enough just being a kid, growing up anywhere in the world, right? It's just a strange experience. But then being there, obviously, with your family, your siblings, and then going to school and interacting with other children. Of course, your body is the only body you've lived in. Yeah. So there's not really a direct reference point. But I'm kind of curious as to how did your parents communicate that with you? How were other children with you? Was it a curiosity? Was it something people were understanding about, about? Just a combination? How was it?
It's a great question. I think in 1996, at least the way that my dad described it, is people like me were still kind of hushed, shunned, or like it wasn't like a celebration. It was more of like a pity thing. The family feels bad for everybody, and my parents went through a lot of challenges. The doctor saying to abort me, their own family saying like you shouldn't have it. They called me an it. That really messed my dad up. Even if he survives birth, you should give him away. And they like had to drown out all of the experts and all their family and friends, and said like, we're gonna go through with this pregnancy, and we're gonna figure it out. Like this is not an option. Like we're gonna figure it out. And when I was born, when they took me home, they didn't like pre-frame my brother or sisters. They didn't be like, hey, by the way, we're coming home. They just like, they came home, didn't say anything, just put me on the table, unwrapped me, and they, my brother was like, cool, like, look at this. Like, they didn't know, because
how old would he have been?
Like, he'd probably been like 7.
Okay.
Yes, 6 or 7.
Okay.
And they didn't put an emphasis on it. It was just like, this is your brother, he's different. And then that was kind of just the way that they rolled me into the family. And then the environment dynamic was really massive, because my parents, of course, as I'm a baby, they're helping me, but they would put me in situations that forced me to figure it out on my own, right? So at a specific age, my mom started just putting my clothes in front of me. Be like, okay, Nick, like, try to put your pants on, and here's your shirt, and she would try to show me how to do it, but they would never do it for me. And it pushed me to become independent. Okay, I can dress myself. And then they would take me to the next thing. They would put me in a high chair with food there with a spoon, and they'd just be like, mess with it, go for it, and I'd try all these different things. So I got really creative and very solution oriented at an early age, which I believe has helped me a lot in business, is because the creativity, the resourcefulness, the resilience, and being solution oriented and focusing on the solution versus the problem. Also, I failure was very prominent in my life. It wasn't a thing that I was sheltered from. It wasn't a thing that I was held away from. Like, I failed a lot. I failed at everything. I probably failed more than the average kid, because everything was hard. Yeah. And so I developed an empowering relationship with failure, which changed the game. I mean, just think about how many people right now are listening to this podcast that won't post content because they think it's going to fail. Or they won't start the podcast because they think it's going to fail.
Or someone's going to make fun of them.
Exactly, right? So just think, like, all of the indoctrination that stops you from ultimately living the life that you want. And so that was the dynamic growing up. The other dynamic was my dad like immediately reached out to like the mayor and was like, hey, this is baby Nick. I want you to announce to the community that he's here. And so he took the total opposite route of like, instead of nobody knowing who my son is, his frame was like, everybody's going to know who my son is. And then he rallied, and they did fundraisers and big philanthropy things. Like, they were doing the thing. And then sibling wise, beat up and picked on just like everybody else. My siblings destroyed me. My brother was a wrestler, so I'm always getting thrown up on the couch. And my sister was a gymnast, so she taught me how to handstand onto the toilet and handstand onto the chair. Like how I got on here, like she was a gymnast, so she taught me how to flip and do things. And then my other sister, Megan, she was as I got into like middle school and high school, I love food. I'm an Italian kid, so if I don't work out, I'm just chubby. And she would always, make fun of me for being fat. And so that pushed me to be active. And so it was very aggressive, in a good way, aggressive childhood of like no one treated me different. And then the social dynamic in school is, luckily, I had incredible friends, and not intentionally, but my incredible friends were also jacked, scary friends. They were
okay.
They were like it was the wrestlers. And so like, as in physical bullying, none of that. Social bullying, no. Really, bro, it's like I probably created a lot of my own suffering. Let me just take a second on this, because this just came to me. I probably created most of my suffering.